You're listening to WESU-Middletown, 88.1 FM, all the way to the left on your dial. And this is Horizontal Power Hour, your source for anarchist thought, culture, and politics. We'd like to remind the listener that the views expressed on this show are our own and in no way reflect the views and opinions of Wesleyan University or the WESU management. For that matter, we don't even represent our entire collective, as each of us is our own person with our own unique perspective on the world. Now we have an interview with Emma from the Beehive Design Collective in Machias, Maine. This collective prints intricate artistic designs used to educate people about specific social issues. Hi, Emma, are you with us?
I'm here.
So can you tell us a little bit about what Beehive's main purpose as a collective is?
Well, the Beehive Design Collective is a all-volunteer art and activist collective. That's mission is to cross-pollinate the grassroots by creating these anti-copyright and collaborative images that teach through storytelling. Basically, we're a group of folks who are trying to explain very complex and overwhelming issues that are facing the world today by breaking it down and drawing cartoons of it. Basically, we make one giant graphic novel that's on one big piece of paper, and we travel around telling stories with it and learning and sharing back and forth across images. What we call them are graphic campaigns is the word that we use because we try really hard to embed our process and also the stories in social movements. So it's very much an active tool for organizing and educating. It's not just a sterile, piece of paper that hangs on the wall in a gallery. It's an image that goes and lives out in the world. We make the image and replicate them as posters that we distribute to folks that they can take the story home with them and put it on their wall or put it in their classroom. And we also have them as giant, 16-foot to 32-foot wide banners that we use to travel with and put in the streets and put up in rooms and put on the side of buildings. And then we navigate through the imagery that's on the graphic, like all these different scenes of action and landscape that are happening to describe the story that's laid out there.
So we're focusing this show on collectives. Can you tell us what makes Beehive a collective and talk about your organizational structure?
Yeah. The Beehive's been a very organic, growing organism. We're actually turning 10 this year, so this is a really awesome moment of growth and reflection for us as an organization. But when we first started 10 years ago, we were actually a group of stone mosaicists. Over the years, we've had a bunch of different folks with different talents come and join the collective when we started making these graphic posters to add visuals that social movements could use to explain their issues in ways that weren't very complicated and wordy so that anyone could understand them and make them accessible. Just over the years, that's been the energy and the direction that our group has taken because there's been such an overwhelming response and need for this type of graphic work in the world. So we've changed and grown a whole lot, but now we're a pretty strong collective of a bunch of folks. We're about 13 altogether. And we have different levels of involvement because we have a house that we all live and work together and create together in Machias, Maine, where 6 folks who are the core full-time bees live and work. And then we have another kind of ring of folks who are involved with us who are autonomous bees who live kind of in other places throughout the hemisphere. We have folks in Colombia, we have folks in Canada, folks in Mexico, who have copies of Beehive materials and do educational work in their own communities. And the range of relationships that those folks have to the center of the Beehive are pretty wide and varied. But we stay in touch and keep in each other's loop about what's going on and how people are using the work. And then we have hundreds of folks who come and visit us every year. We host annual work parties throughout the summer to help us do restoration work on our buildings here in Maine. And so the way people have gotten involved with us is large, and exactly what the collective structure looks like kind of depends a little bit on what your relationship to the organism is. We have a central core that is a consensus-run and horizontally decided upon, decision-making organization. And that's how everything that we do is extremely collaborative, from how we make our posters, which is a collaborative process. We have anywhere between 4 to 10 people who work on a project at a time, and then we also live together and support each other as domestic living partners, and we also make our organizational decisions as a collective. So we're trying very hard to embody the metaphor of the beehive, which is, social insects who live and work together all the time.
Can you tell us about some challenges that you face, both in the day-to-day tasks of just living together and in actually creating your art and going on tour talking about it?
Speaking from my perspective, as a middle-class white person in the United States, I have been conditioned not to live this way. And most of the folks who have come to us at certain points in their life, we're seeking something that we've lost in this culture of, figuring out how to do this as a group, how to live together as a collective, as thinking not, kind of breaking outside of the rugged individual stereotype or archetype that's been passed down through our history classes to us as far as what is the United States citizens' ideal. So we all have things that we have to overcome to make living as a collective viable, because we all have broken experiences in our life from living in a culture that's so isolating and so damaging. So we all come to this with different pieces of emotional baggage that we have to process. So just by the act of trying to live together, there's going to be a lot of challenges, because it's not something that we have practice in or even have really elders that we can look to help us guide us in those situations. So there's always, interpersonal challenges of trying to work together as a group with folks. And that's something that just takes time and patience and a lot of trial and error. And, people, are emotional beings, and, feelings get hurt. And it's been probably the hardest and the most rewarding experience of my life to be in the Beehive and try to figure out how to work past those things with a committed group of people who want to make something happen in the world. And I think what makes the Beehive unique, because those are challenges that any collective would face, but specifically within the Beehive, we have this extra challenge of figuring out how to not only live together, not only make decisions together as an organization, but also to create together. And that's something that is trying to tackle an even more isolated world, which is, the concept of art in our culture is very individualistic. It's very ego-driven. It's very based in this capital A art world culture of, people making money and trying to make money and being a starving artist and putting their stuff in galleries, and it being a lot of what a successful artist is someone who's usually pretty removed from, the people to say that, their stuff is in galleries that are usually inaccessible, they're expensive, the artwork is, produced from a really different place. And that's a very big generalization, but that's kind of where the concept of a successful artist goes. And we try really hard to break down the concept of an artist ego and figure out how to design an image by committee, which is not something that's easy to do by any stretch of the imagination. So I think there's an added challenge to the work that we do, where not only are we bringing our individualistic tendencies as humans, but we're also bringing our individualistic and egocentric ideas to the table for creating something. It's really hard to let go of an idea that you're very attached to in order to let other people grow and shape it. So it's something we've really had to learn to practice, which is to remember that oftentimes the group thought can add and build on an idea, and it's what we've seen happen. Our work is powerful and able to do the work that it does in the world because we don't have any one individual driving it, that it's something that's built by many voices and many hands, and that's what makes it powerful.
Going back to that idea of taking the ego out of art, your website mentions that you seek to anonymously function as a word-to-image translators for the images that you convey. Can you talk more about this anonymity and how this relates to your collective model?
The idea of our work is that we don't see ourselves as owners. That's one of the reasons that it's anti-copyright. It's anti-copyright for many reasons. One, because we want people to reproduce it and have it live out in the world so that it's useful, but also because we didn't make it. No individual person was responsible for making any of our graphics happen, because it really is a collaborative process from the very start. And it's not just artists. It's folks who put together research trips, because of all of our work is based in firsthand interactions with folks who are being impacted by different issues, whether it's the Plan Colombia and the war on drugs in Colombia to mountaintop removal mining in Appalachia. We always make sure that we talk with folks who are directly impacted and not having it being mediated by books or scholars. So it's a big act of trust for folks to share their stories with us. And, it's those stories that are being put on the paper. It's not ours. These aren't our stories to own. But we are helping create a tool that amplifies those stories and gets them out in the world in a really powerful and creative way. So we're anonymous and we are anti-copyright because it's hard to say whose work it is. It's a work of many people. It's the work of hundreds of voices, and it's the work of many artists and researchers and translators and people who came together to make the graphic campaign what it is in the world.
And how do you actually go about doing this research to find all the information you need to create a very detailed design?
We've never just picked a graphics campaign to do out of the air. It's always been a direct request and something that folks invited us to participate in and collaborate in making with them. So when we've done our work in Central America, we usually start with a few basic contacts who help us grow our network once we're in the ground. And then for Appalachia, we worked directly in conjunction with the Mountain Justice Network, which is a group of activists and community organizations who are working to end mountaintop removal. And we were hosted in each of the most impacted states through the different campaign houses and community organizations that are working on the issue. So it's always been kind of different, but it's always really focused on coming and sharing our work and explaining who we are and doing story sharing back and forth. So it usually involves us bringing our past work and sitting down and getting to know a community and then doing interviews and oral histories with folks that we listen to and take notes on. And then our step in the process is we take all of those words and try to turn them into images and stories.
Your work is internationally known, especially the graphics, but can you talk a little more about what you do in your local communities?
We've been talking mostly about the graphic campaign work that we do, but we also have, we live collectively in Maine and have a house that we maintain, but we also do this stone mosaic work still, and we also have a community center that we've been restoring over the past 10 years in our small little town in Maine. There's this old building called a Grange Hall, which used to be a farmers' union hall, and it's a 100-year-old building in our community that was in danger of being destroyed. In 2000, when we formed, and we were a Stone Mosaics group, we were looking for a place to house us and be our studio space, and we bought this building with the intention of restoring it. And then over the past 10 years, as we've learned more about our community, realized what an important community center that building has been historically for the past 100 years. And once the building was to the point where it was open to the public and we had done most of the major restoration work, that we had fundraised by doing these speaking tours. Like, that's how we sustain ourselves, is by going out in the world and asking for donations for the work. And doing the storytelling is what has provided the financial ability to restore this 100-year-old community center in our town in Maine. And the way we make sense of all these different kind of pieces of what we do is that we view the world through kind of a microscopic and macroscopic lens. So trying to find the connections of how these big international issues that we analyze in our graphics, how those issues play out in our local town in Maine, and how we can be a part of creating change here at the grassroots in our own community. And just like in our graphics, it can be this one small image of an ant who is the keystone species in a rainforest ecosystem is what makes the image and the story come together. It's also about how one building in a small town can mean so much to a community and start being a place where folks rebuilding connections to each other, where we share art and culture together, or where we come to have meetings and where we come to talk about important issues in our community. It's kind of seeing how those small pieces all interlace to tell the same story of grassroots resistance and movement building.
Well, thanks for joining us, Emma. Do you want to tell our listeners about how they can find more information about your collective?
For sure. You can always find us on the web, which is, just at www.beehivecollective.org. But you can also book us to bring us to your town if you want to meet us face-to-face. We're about to go on our fall speaking tour, and we're going to be traveling all over the country, so there's a high likelihood that we're coming to a town near you. So just check our tour page for dates. We're going to be all over the country this year. And you can always feel free to just, drop us an email or give us a call, and we'd love to talk.
Thank you, Emma.
This is Horizontal Power Hour, your source for anarchist thought, culture, and politics.